It's Search Warrant, and we're live. You can catch us on Rumble, YouTube now, X, Twitter, the former Twitter, LinkedIn, iHeart, Spotify, and a bunch of other um, audio outlets. So we have a special guest today, but before we introduce our special guest, I'd like to say identify who's in the background. We've got Detective Jake Jacobs from Philadelphia Homicide and the Officer Involved Unit. Jake, how you doing?
Hey,
Did
John.
you get much snow down there?
We actually did pretty well. Not too bad. So not as bad as Buffalo.
Yeah, pretty bad here. Well, Pittsburgh anyway. And we've got veteran NCIS Special Agent Greg Highlands from Tennessee.
That's right.
Greg
And
probably did well.
How'd you fare in Tennessee?
We just got a dusting. Just a dusting.
Just a dusting. No ice.
No ice. We were supposed to be the eye of it, but we didn't. It stayed to the west of us, the Nashville area, and then went straight up your way.
Yeah,
I'm going to tell you, I'm not really disappointed though.
Yeah, you can't be disappointed.
You probably wish for that.
Yes.
So was Mrs. Highlands happy with the dusting anyway?
No, she wasn't. She wanted 2 feet of snow. So.
At least she would be the one shoveling it, right?
No, she'd be watching me from the window.
That's why she wanted it.
Yeah.
I see. Well, we have a special guest today. We've had Dr. Graham Spanier. He's an author of many books, as well as having been the president of Penn State. And he has a high respect for anybody that knows what he's done at Penn State. And we'll go through some of those things. Doctor, we appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Thank you very much, sir.
Happy to be on your show again.
Sir, let's see. Bill, can we bring up the book, his book? It's In the Lion's Den, The Rush to Judgment. And it's still available on Amazon. Is that correct, sir?
Yeah, I think so. It's there's probably a few hardcovers left. It's mostly sold out, but there's soft cover books available. Yes, you can get it through Amazon.
It's kind of tells the story from the very beginning, which we kind of want to do here. People have had an opportunity to reflect on what happened just by listening to or reading headlines, unfortunately, which gets them into trouble. Just reading headlines and not understanding what is happening actually. So, Doctor, I first wanted to give people an idea. You weren't just the president of Penn State. There was a lot prior to that. You were the president of several universities. May I ask what they were?
Well, I was they called it chancellor, same as president, at the University of Nebraska before I moved to Penn State as president in 1995 and served through the end of 2011. Before that, I was the provost and vice president at Oregon State University, and I've had other administrative positions in higher education, in addition to having the lead role for a number of the national higher education organizations, the NCAA, the Big Ten Conference, the Bowl Championship Series. I worked with many government agencies in the national security arena. I had the lead role in national security matters for American higher education. So I was the go-to guy for a lot of things and relating to colleges, universities, and in our country more generally.
Yes, sir. I particularly want to, towards the end, if we have time, I'd like to talk to you about the NCAA. We'd like to talk to you about the NCAA and NIL, which is a big deal nowadays. I
Yeah.
sure, had you uh, fulfilled your destiny, I'm sure it'd be more secure and understandable now. Uh, I think of that every time that I hear the NIL. I think, I think to myself, how would that actually be if Dr. Graham Spanier would have run that instead of the people that are running it now? You know what I mean?
It would be different. I
Way, way
through,
different.
through 2011, during my time on the NCAA executive committee and representing the Big Ten, in some ways I was the guy who had my finger in the dam for all of this transfer portal NIL. And when I stepped down from the presidency at Penn State and therefore gave up some of my other roles, everything broke loose. And the NCAA and collegiate athletics as we know it now does not resemble what it was like a couple of decades ago.
I was just going to say, could you have envisioned what we have now?
I could have envisioned and did envision that it was a possibility. Um, we were working on the issues. We needed to put some guardrails around it, but there were no guardrails put around it, and there really still haven't been. Uh, there's been some cases in and out of court, which has influenced how this has gone. But the way I would describe it is at the moment is you can't get the toothpaste back in the tube. Uh, it's happened and we're going to have to deal with it. But how are we going to deal with it? What are the rules going to be? What are the limits going to be? Are we going to continue to see that rich get richer and the poor get poorer, the haves and the have-nots? It's getting to resemble more professional athletics, where for a lot of athletes and a lot of sports, even some sports you might not even think about, it's about the money now. It's about the money, and people are moving all around to get the best deal.
Dr. Spanier,
Yeah.
can I jump in real quick on that? It's just that I know we're going to talk about the other stuff. And when you just said you had your finger in the dam, I just don't want to get off of it. And you knew this stuff, and I think you could foresee this coming. I don't understand a lot of this NIL stuff, to be quite honest with you. But I'm just wondering if part of their plan, because of what we're going to get into, what happened to you, did this have any bearing on that?
Yeah.
Which you putting, to remove your finger from the dam, so to speak.
I don't think so. Yeah, I think it's a separate issue. When I say I had my finger in the dam, there were all kinds of pressures around to go in the direction where we are now. I was opposed to that, and people were following my lead on it. I had chaired the commission on the commercialization of collegiate athletics for the NCAA in maybe 2008. And then in 2011, at the request of the then president of the NCAA, I chaired a commission on student athlete welfare, which was designed, and we put a number of proposals forward to make sure that our athletes were treated as well as they could be, fairly compensated in terms of tuition, room, board expenses, emergencies, healthcare, you name it. But that all kind of fell apart, and the dam broke at the end of 2011 or so, when this whole business at Penn State that sucked me in unfairly and unfortunately evolved.
Right. I just want to mention to our audience that Dr. Spanier is a world-class racquetball champion, and I've seen him play quite a bit at Rec Hall. And needless to say, you initially say, yeah, you could get in there, you could survive, but once you actually see what he does, that's another story. The guy is incredible.
Oh my gosh, that's the
He
best
is
compliment
incredible.
I ever had.
He is incredible. So he's resolving knee surgery, which I actually hear is, this is crazy, but I understand that hip surgery is easier than knee surgery. Is
Yes.
that accurate?
Yeah, this is the toughest of all of the orthopedic surgeries from everything I know. And it's more painful, the recovery's harder, but everyone assures me a few weeks from now I'm going to be so happy that I had it done, and it was at a point where I needed it done.
Yes, sir. You can get back. Did they say how soon you get back on the court?
Well, might be a couple more months. It might be several months. I'll try to get back sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Greg Jake, you should watch. People watch him play racquetball. It's amazing. It really is good.
I played handball coming up, obviously being a boy from the streets. But for some reason, Dr. Spanier, I got scared of that darn that racquetball as fast as that ball moves. So if you're great at it, it's amazing.
Well, I played handball as a kid, and after each match, my hand would be swollen and sore. And one day I'm out there and I see somebody. This was 1973 with a racket. I said, "What sport is that?" And they said, "Well, that's racquetball." And I thought, "You mean I can play the same sport and not beat up my hands?"
Yeah.
On that day, I switched and never looked back.
Yeah. Well, when you play, you have an audience. I'll tell you that much. It's quite the exhibition. People talk big, but they don't want to get in there with you. That's for sure. Aye. Bill, let's show the second website, if we could, please. Okay, this gives you a good idea of Graham Spanier's background. We touched on a little bit. If you didn't know before, he was the president, chancellor of Oregon State, right?
Called it provost there.
Provost at Oregon State. And if you go to C-SPAN and search him, you're going to find a lot of good stuff. You can really, if you read the book that he authored, which is very accurate. He had to come out with his own accuracy, which is reflected by numerous other independent journalists and journalists that only care about the truth. If you go through that, you'll see that it was basically in the very beginning. I was interviewed. I had investigated this case and considered it to be a political hit job by someone who had a vendetta for someone else. And the governor at that time, Tom Corbett, who we've seen in other cases, like Finnerty, like Sergeant Finnerty in Boston and Lunsford in New Mexico. The accusers, they want some recognition. So they find themselves at community colleges, which is crazy. There's not to get off on a tangent, but the prosecutor in the Boston wrongful prosecution case of Sergeant Finnerty, who had already been exonerated, and the prosecutor was using it for purposes of political purposes, again, found herself at a community college. Am I right, Craig?
Yes. Yep. You're right on. Spot on.
Yeah. So, you know, unbelievable. You'd think if somebody really had their stuff together and really they would find themselves much better than a community college. And I believe that the last time I checked in on the former Governor Corbett, he was doing something at a community college and was attached to some law firm in Maryland. Jake, you should chase that down. No. Anyway, yeah, it was. If you really look at it, you're gonna see that there were a lot of problems with that case. But I think that if you have a chance to look through what we're presenting on the screen, you'll see that there's a problem. Bill, can we bring the third up? Okay, this this is when Frank Parlato, investigative reporter, has time, he's going to show up. He's with clients now, but he just came out with this on a 3-part series. Pennsylvania prosecutors responded to Sandusky PCRA by ignoring the evidence. Exactly what they've done in the past. Which is frustrating to say the least. I mean, Greg, Jake, you've read that. What are your thoughts on that?
Greg, I'll let you take it.
Yeah, it's one is that there's so many layers to the case, and one thing that Frank does really well is he draws a bead on the actual issues, and so I highly recommend anyone who wants an insight into this case that affects affects multiple people, to give it a read. The surprising thing is that I'm from Pennsylvania. I went to Bloomsburg University and I went to Bucknell. And when I go home to visit, they ask what I'm doing. And because of the show, at the time that your case was going on and Mr. Sandusky's case, all I got was the talking points in the media. I never actually got down to the brass tacks and the stuff that they had in the media at the time. To find out later, because of the show, was all false. It was all lies, and unfortunately for a lot of people in Pennsylvania, and I would say a majority of the people in Pennsylvania, they don't actually know the true facts of the case. Frank does a good job with his articles to bring that out.
I think that's right. When I'm out and about around town and meeting a lot of people and still staying very involved, people are very, very supportive. And anybody who has gone to the trouble to look at the facts is very supportive. But a lot of people are just not sure. I think what you just had up on the screen about the Frank report, his recent reports, is interesting from this perspective, because it's now 14 or so years later, and what's evolved more recently is a couple of Sandusky's accusers have recanted their testimony. The mother of one of them, the wife of one of them. If you listen to all the various parts of this, it should begin, if people were paying attention, to cause individuals to realize something's not right here. What is also revealed in the recent writings is that Frank Fina and Joe McGettigan, who just died recently, were involved in administering the funds that were paid by Penn State to so-called witnesses. There were millions of dollars distributed, and for the one with the biggest payout, they became the trustees of that individual's money, which has caused some consternation within that family, and they have profited from it personally. So there are people in Pennsylvania who believed the media narrative that came out in the beginning that you described. Others that delved more deeply into it came to a point of skepticism. So people might have different opinions about Jerry Sandusky's guilt or innocence, but I've never run into anyone who had thought that he got a fair trial. He was rushed into a trial. There are all kinds of things about that prosecution that raised some issues.
Every aspect, quite frankly. You know, and people will say State College is a small community. Nothing gets by everybody. Well, I can tell you this much. Nobody was shouting this on the streets. No one was shouting this on the streets. Jerry showed up at high school football games. You know, was a feature at high school football games. Had there been something to indicate that he was, less than above board, I think it would have come out then, because he was not to be. I'm not being disrespectful, but he is a simple person. You know, he doesn't. He has simple simple goals, and he sees those goals. But for them to say that they recognized some kind of problem, I'm sorry. There was not
You know what, John, it's like the doctor said, we're almost 15 years out from this incident. And I, like many others, as an outsider, believe what was being fed to me as an outsider. And if I never came across John and Ralph and Frank in this show, and John just brought up the Penn State community, when people see me from the show and out and about where I'm at, whether it's on vacation or whatever, and they might have looked at the show or know something about this, in that Penn State community, they all say the same thing. This never occurred, which brings up John's point that Jerry went out and about. He went to high school games. He stayed out. Joe Pye, when you have someone like Franco and everyone else come out and stay in that Penn State community. And that's why I asked you earlier with the NIL stuff. Was there, and not being a conspiracy theorist, right, I just want to know if there's ulterior motives for this. It just so happens that in 2011, when this stuff came out, this NIL stuff was starting to go. Jerry, from what I know now, and I knew Joe McGettigan. I talked to John a couple of weeks ago just to make sure it was the same Joe McGettigan I knew from Philadelphia. Because he didn't look the same from when I know him. I know when he was a lot younger and looked a little different. But the mentality of that Joe McGettigan, I knew, because I'm on the law enforcement side, and he was someone who I would communicate with. We'll leave it at that. But the mindset of people, it's just this whole, and John just asked me to look up Tom Corbett. And a brief looking up of Tom Corbett, you see some of the same players that are connected to all of this stuff. And this was just a 5-minute, now granted I'm an investigator, but this was just a 5-minute quick look, and you notice these things.
Well, Frank,
I just don't understand how they took you down with this kind of stuff, with everything you had going on. And you said you got pulled down in that vortex. I don't know how.
Frank Fina, who was the chief of the criminal division when Tom Corbett was the attorney general, was on a mission to bring some people down. Unfortunately and very unfairly, Joe Paterno lost his job over this, and Joe did nothing wrong. Maybe someday they'll put a statue back up and people will realize that he deserves all the praise that he's ever earned. But then initially, they charged our senior vice president for finance and business, Gary Schultz, and our athletic director, Tim Curley. But they continued to be determined to go after what I think they thought was the big prize, was me.
Yeah, exactly.
I was the president, and it took them a whole year after all of this to finally charge me, really, in a sense, minutes before Frank Fina was to lose his job because a new attorney general was elected, and he wouldn't have been able to follow through. And the only way he could do it was to get Penn State's former legal counsel, Cynthia Baldwin, to testify before the grand jury at the last minute in a very rehearsed testimony, which frankly was full of lies. All of this is in my book, very well documented and summarized. And, during that year, now Corbett moved into the governor's position, and Linda Kelly and Fina and McGettigan and others were still involved. I was really never very worried about anything because I knew I didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
I didn't see any basis for anything. I actually offered to go back to the grand jury and clarify any questions they had. They turned that down. Then they brought in Louis Free, who was a work for hire. And because of his former credentials, that was given some weight in public opinion. But, one of the things I had on my side was that because I held a top secret and above sensitive compartmented information security clearances, when you have clearances at that level, and I had the lead role in national security matters for American higher education, and I worked very closely with the FBI, the CIA, NCIS, all of the different intelligence agencies. I was on the National Counterintelligence Working Group as a civilian. So when a little issue arrives, or a big issue, they want to send somebody in to investigate this from the US government standpoint. And they sent in John Snedden, who was then as a special investigator. And not only did he give me a clean bill of health, his report of 300 pages, including the appendices, was longer than the Free report. I mean, he interviewed a lot of people, and he knew that I was fine, and my security clearances were renewed at that point. So, John, of course, is mentioned in the book for the work that he did and the report that he did. But, it's using the analogy again of the toothpaste out of the tube. Once there were two things that we all had going against us. One was this visceral, broad reaction from the media, and the prosecutors really worked their angles. They made Sandusky out to be the devil, and anyone who might have known about him, if he was the devil, they were as bad or worse, and everybody ought to go to jail. And they spent millions of taxpayer dollars pursuing all of this. And it's very hard to get the narrative reversed when all of that has happened.
Yes, sir. I'd like to see the breakdown. Greg actually was was in management and NTIS once he broke through the glass ceiling, so to speak. And I can just imagine what the cost was to send one agent to do this entire investigation versus a political appointee like Louis Freeh
Sure.
and his group of people.
Well, that cost Penn State over $8 million is what they paid Louis Freeh.
Well, it wasn't $8 million they paid us.
No, you were here 2 or 3 days. You're working around the clock, talking to everybody, writing your report up. Yeah.
If we may get into this and we may not, but if you go to Grok, the AI on X or ChatGPT, I think Grok is probably the best bet, and put in the Snedden report, you're going to see a summary of what actually was found. And
I'd be interested to know, I hope you don't mind me asking the question, but who actually hired Louis Freeh?
You took the words right out of my mouth, Greg. Yes.
Pennsylvania System of Higher Education, is that who hired him?
It was the Penn State Board of Trustees officially, but it was upon the recommendation of, I would say, 2 individuals in particular. One who had been on the Second Mile Board, Jerry Sandusky's charity, and the other was Tom Corbett, who recommended that they bring in Louis Freeh. And as I mentioned in my book, it's just, I could have had a 1,000-page book, but to keep it within limits, Louis Freeh and Tom Corbett were acquainted because if you go back to the Vioxx settlement, the drug Vioxx, where there was billions of dollars of settlement, some of the state's attorneys general were involved in capturing money from that. And Louis Freeh, I think Tom Corbett felt that Louis Freeh, who was brought in by the pharmaceutical company to help get through all of this, was very helpful to Tom Corbett in Pennsylvania, and he got several $1 million out of it. So I think that's what happened. And of course, initially everybody thinks, oh, you're bringing in the head of the FBI. This is going to be the definitive report. But in fact, he was at that point involved in all kinds of financial enterprises that involved doing reviews and investigations. And it was very high-priced help. And so everything that was written about it was about former FBI Director Louis Freeh says this or found that. But this wasn't him in any governmental role, any official capacity. And even people on his staff who he brought in to help him with this along the way, and I talk a little about it in my book, basically said, you don't have the evidence for that. You can't say that in your report. That's not what happened. They would give him feedback saying, that's not what we've learned. And I believe in the early drafts of his report, it wasn't as strong and negative as it was in the very end. He clearly changed some things at the very end for some reason to make it all look worse than it was.
Right. Not anticipating that anybody would go back and look at it. Because they wouldn't. Because they would just read the headlines. I mean, there were things that he should have checked. First of all, he's a political appointee. So, people were putting weight on that, as you said before. But that doesn't mean that he did a good job.
Over 14 years now. You've gone back and looked at it. all. I've gone back and looked at it. Frank Parlato in recent years has done it. John Ziegler from the very beginning. There have been a lot of people out there. And you mentioned Franco Harris, good friend. We miss him dearly. He started doing podcasts and broadcasts and interviews saying this was all wrong. So many people have done that, and which, by the way, continues to be remarkable to me, that after all this time, so many people out there who know what happened was wrong. What happened to Joe Paterno, Gary Schultz, Tim Curley, me, and you know what? It wasn't just the four of us who lost our jobs. It was dozens of Penn State employees. Anyone who worked with us or for us or was dragged into it. It was horrible. It disrupted the lives of so many people and families.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, people like Cynthia Baldwin go on with their lives. I know you say it's hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube, but I'm just from the school where, and I'm maybe a little naive, I think criminal charges are warranted, and it's a shame. Maybe the statute is over, the 5-year statute of limitations and things of that nature, but they ruin people's lives. And, whether it's Joe Pye, Franco Harris, when he first started to do the podcast, right around the time he was trying to expose this, unfortunately, he passed away, and without John and Frank.
In Pittsburgh, they were trying to take his name off of some things.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, they later come around on that, but yeah, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's fine. I want to hear everything I can from you, Doctor, at the time that we have, so feel free anytime. It's just I believe there should be consequences for these actions, and it doesn't seem like there's going to be, and poor Jerry Sandusky may die in prison as a result for what we now know is a myriad of lies.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
people wake up to that.
My wish has always been not to put anybody in prison. If more of the victims, the so-called victims who got money from Penn State, come forward and recant their testimony, they all know, and this has been exposed, that so much of their testimony was false. I don't care. Let them, I said, let them keep the money. That's not what I care about. The fact is, most of them have blown the money, from what I've heard. But
yes.
Let's just get the truth out there for once and for all, so that people can understand. And Penn State as a university at some point has to be willing to say the Board of Trustees in 2011, 2012 made some bad decisions. They didn't handle this well, and we're sorry what happened, and now let's try to fix it and get on with it and restore people's reputations.
Yeah, well, Joe McGettigan is dead, and other people are dead. The only people that can really come out before they die, why don't Frank Fina and Louis Free come out and tell the truth? Because those are two of the only people that I know who's a part of this charade that could come out right now. Like I said, the statute of limitations is up. Since you don't want anybody in prison, then the statute is already up. The people already have their money. Maybe you guys need to sign a waiver. I don't know. But they got this poor man still in jail for 14 years, just withering away, unfortunately. Why not Frank and Louis comes up? The only thing they can be worried about at this point in time is their reputation and Penn State's reputation. But they tarnished and destroyed you guys' reputation.
I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, Frank Fina and Louis Free are the last two people on earth who I would expect to come up with a different story, a different explanation at this point. And the actual prosecutor, the lead prosecutor at my trial, because Fina was no longer in the Office of Attorney General, he was since suspended from the practice of law for what he did to me. Cynthia Baldwin was censured by the
Yeah.
Pennsylvania Supreme Court for what she did. And I just don't, I don't see how that's all going to. I just can't imagine that FINA and Free will change their tune. But after FINA was no longer the prosecutor, it was turned over to someone named Bruce Beamer,
Yeah.
who then was acting attorney general for a while. I think he's still a judge in Pittsburgh. Was what happened to him. And then the person in court who actually did the prosecution was Laura Ditka, who died of a heart attack shortly after the trial. She was, the famous football player's niece. Laura Ditka was her name. So a lot of the people involved aren't really around. Josh Shapiro became involved after he became the attorney general and inherited the case, so to speak, under him. It wasn't him personally, it was all of his folks continued to prosecute this. And even after it was thrown out in federal court for a number of good reasons, he elected to continue with it.
Yeah. Jake, they have a conviction integrity unit.
Yo, come on, John.
And
You talking about in Philadelphia? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is sideways, kind of, obviously. For it's a money-making event.
Yes.
But if it was based on its name, Conviction Integrity Unit, the state has Josh Shapiro ever thought to himself, this has run its course. You've taken your laps based on allegedly being correct on the Sandusky case. Perhaps you were wrong.
Well, Dr. Spanier, if not these people, then who? Because I don't think, from what John's saying, is Josh is going to do it. If he has eyes for the presidency, there's no way he's going to open this can of worms in the next couple of years. So that's not going to happen along with FINA and Free. So who do you think that could come through and do it? Anyone? Does anyone
I don't
have any moral turpitude to do something like this?
I don't have I don't think there's any one person who has. I mean, if it was someone who was, very visible in the media, one of the anchors of CNN or a network show that delved into it in a very fair way, that might bring it back. There have been some journalists who have tried to take it on at some level or appear on a show to raise issues, but it would be. I have had some journalists who approached me about 10 or 12 years after all of this unfolded, saying I was one of the reporters who covered all of this. I was on campus doing all of the reporting, and I now know that I was wrong and I made a mistake, and I deeply regret how it has affected you, and before I die, I would like to make it right.
Yeah.
But I don't think they have any idea how they can do that, and their networks or their stations say that's old news. We're not allowing you to take the time to do what you say you want to do. You got to report on today's news. And I talk in my book, there's a chapter called Media Culpa, where
that's good.
One of the prominent national reporters, I think he was with NBC at the time, who covered it all, and was Michael Isikoff. Am I remembering his name right?
Yeah, close to me. That's close.
Yeah. I had a private meeting with him, which my lawyer had arranged. Yeah, we met, I think, for dinner in Washington, D.C. And he had we spent a lot of time talking about the details. And basically, at the end of the dinner, he said, I now realize that I got it wrong. And
Yeah.
I contributed to the narrative. He said, now I have asked at the network if I could fix this, do some additional reporting. And he said, what they told me was no, unless you come up with an even bigger blockbuster of information that would merit a whole new avenue of this story, we can't authorize that. And I said, well, what would that be, for example? What would you need from me to do that? He said, I need to know something so horrible and wrong and unfair about Louis Freeh. He said, if I went back and now the story was Louis Freeh, they would put that on the air. And I said, I'm sorry, I know about what Louis Freeh's involvement is and what he's done, but I can't give you the kind of goods you need for that story. And I'm never going to make anything up or, try to influence you with information that I actually don't have.
But we do have a list of disciplinary action against prosecutors in this case. And we ultimately have prosecutors in charge of $20 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it seems like they're asking for something like he did something wrong in Oklahoma City. I mean, it seems like it's something that would have to be that big, with something with McVeigh or something to overtake Sandusky. It makes no sense. We just want the truth. Just give us the truth. That's all we're asking for.
Well, that's just a little tidbit from, I think I mentioned it briefly in my book about, one of the media issues here.
Speaking of the media, so the coach that supposedly witnessed the shower scene, the news media teed up on that, and that was like their major point to the case. I have never seen, even though that wasn't true, and if please correct my language, I know that words mean something. So if I'm wrong about how I'm saying this, that it never happened. He never said that. But the news media kept reporting that it happened. I have not seen any news media anywhere at that time that came back and did a piece saying, hey, this was wrong. We're sorry to report it this way. Am I wrong about that?
Well, you're mostly right, Greg.
Okay.
He didn't see what he later said that he saw. He didn't. In fact, he told the prosecutors, "That's not what I said, and that's not what I saw." And one of the prosecutors said, "No, you just got to say that anyway. This is what we want you to say.
You got to shut up. You got to shut up."
Yeah. So, you're mostly right about that.
But the news media never came back and said, "Hey, we reported."
What you're defining as the news media. There have been various journalists and writers and bloggers who have reported this discrepancy that you're talking about, but not the mainstream media, not the networks and the largest of the cable platforms and so on. So there are a lot of people out there who still believe that Mike McQueary reported that he had seen an anal rape. And McQueary said, no, I didn't. He later, I testified at his trial, which was, I believe, defined as a whistleblower trial, where
Yeah.
he wanted $12 million for all of this. And I was there in the courtroom listening to all of this testimony, and it's pretty unbelievable that any reasonable jury would have awarded McQuarrie those millions of dollars after hearing all of the testimony from relevant parties. That's a bit of a mystery, but that was he won that whistleblower case, and Penn State paid him millions of dollars.
And then the
That
addition
didn't
of
happen.
the suppressed memory testimony. While you were talking, I was pulling that back up to see how many states actually allow suppressed memory testimony in court. And then I think I just read that Pennsylvania doesn't actually allow it in all cases. It's a case-by-case basis. I'm not an attorney by any stretch of the imaginations. Maybe Frank will talk about that when he's on, but that was a new concept for me. I've never had a case that actually utilized suppressed memory testimony.
Well, there's quite a bit of, I'm a sociologist, and so I've read some of the literature, and if you look at the leading researcher in this field, Elizabeth Loftus, I believe is her name, it has been pretty well denounced or debunked, whatever the right word is, and in a lot of trials where they've taken that approach, all that's been thrown out. Now, as part of one of Jerry Sandusky's PCRA, Post-Conviction Relief Act appeals, which was turned down, they had a very extensive report from an individual who is a psychiatrist and a clinical psychologist, and really came up with a tremendous amount of evidence and reasoning as to why Jerry Sandusky merited a new trial, and they paid no attention to his report. I think Sandusky has tried a number of times to ask for a new trial, but there does not seem to be any judge in Pennsylvania who has been willing, as this has moved around from a few different judges, who's been willing to say, okay, let's talk about this again.
They dismiss facts and only go on procedure because they know the facts are right.
Most of the rebuttal has been on procedure, not on the fairness or the facts or common sense.
Right. I mean, Jake, Greg, if you've got a string of disciplinary action taking place against prosecutors in the same case, just so happens it's the same case that results in prosecutors having authority over $20 million. There's something wrong there.
Yeah, definitely.
When I look at
when a prosecutor, here's what I think is wrong about this. When a prosecutor tells a witness, okay, I'm going to recommend to you a lawyer who can represent you in a lawsuit against Penn State, which could make you a very rich man. And they told one of them, you're never going to have to work again. And then the prosecutor becomes involved in overseeing that money and even shepherding the person who got the money to a different state because he's getting into trouble here and there, or there's all these issues in his life. And then they have the girlfriend of Joe McGettigan, or his wife, I guess.
Gay, yeah.
His wife now is the one who's managing the money and overseeing the trust on behalf of FINA and McGettigan, I think it doesn't meet the smell test. Is that the right analogy?
Yeah, exactly. So let's bring up the next website, if we could, please.
Unfortunately, I observed that pattern in practice throughout.
In Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia, it's the same MO, so to speak. I mean, how do you go from prosecutor to handling the money, and you work in your cahoots or collusion, whatever you want to say, with the defense attorney to make sure that the prosecution or the defendant gets the money? It's, when they call Krasner the let him loose and all that kind of stuff, it's like the same thing as FINA and everything. You can't work both sides of the scales. And when the law decides, okay, we may have more in the facts, but something procedurally was done wrong, so we're not going to let Jerry out, we're not going to let the truth come out. I don't know how you get around that, because it never makes it to the level legally, because the judges say, well, procedurally something was done wrong, so we're not going to even hear it again.
Yeah.
They're not going to give Jerry a new trial based on the facts that has been uncovered since that rush to judgment, so to speak.
You would think that that'd be like a conflict of interest, and like stated like in the bar association as an attorney or something.
Yeah.
Like the Hippocratic oath with a doctor or something. That
Well, one
we discovered evidence.
of the issues in my case is they were claiming that I heard something from one of my colleagues in 2001 that if I really knew about it, maybe I should have reported it, even though there was no law on the books at that time, that the supervisor of a supervisor of a supervisor had to report it. And in any case, there was a 2-year statute of limitations, which is one of the reasons it was thrown out in federal court, because I wasn't charged for another 12 years. But the prosecutors in Pennsylvania ignored that. They ignored that it was thrown out in federal court, and they ignored the fact that you can't charge somebody with a crime that wasn't on the books in the law as a crime at the time. You can't retroactively. So they made up. They made up at my trial this crazy argument, which, by the way, the jury threw out. I was found not guilty on all of the charges, except for a low-level misdemeanor in the end. They said, well, we're going to charge you with a continuing conspiracy, because every day since 2001 that you didn't call and report this to law enforcement, report this thing that you never heard to law enforcement, you have been engaged in a continuing conspiracy. And so even in 2000 years later, we can still charge you.
Oh, God.
That I was found not guilty for all of those things. And, in the end, that one misdemeanor charge was really just a couple of the jurors have said they were tired. It was 4:00 on Friday. They'd been there all week. They wanted to go home. It was a compromise. We're just going to find them not guilty on everything except this one little thing, failure to report or something. And that was that.
Doctor, we also don't take into account what happened to Baldwin and FINA as a result of what they did to you. That's not new evidence. I mean, you got censure and disbarment and for what they did to you, even that misdemeanor. This is troubling. Not just, this is 15, 16 years later, like you said, and they want to use the continuing doctrine. I forgot the exact total name of it against you, but they won't say this is a continuing doctrine of what's going on every day. This truth's not coming out with you and Jerry and Joe and everyone else. They don't want to use that same doctrine that they used on you to get you that misdemeanor. It's ridiculous.
Well,
Right. I mean, if you're a part of the audience, we're bringing this up because it's wrong.
Yes.
It's wrong. The whole thing was wrong from the get-go.
I still get, let's call it bad mail or whatever you call it, because they know I try to be as factual. I keep everything simple, but they still say, "Hey, Jake, you're supporting this or you're supporting that." No, I'm just trying to get you the truth, guys. Simple. If you know me before this, you should know me after this. Nothing changes, but they still want to go on this narrative of what happened to you guys, and we got to keep beating this drum. I know you said Free and Fiend is not going to come out. I know you say Josh not going to come out. We have to have someone to come out and say, "Hey, this never happened." I don't care who the hell it is. Excuse my language, but this is ridiculous.
Yeah, I think you add to the fact that you've got a string of disciplinary actions against the prosecutors that is unheard of. You've got 2 prosecutors that are in charge of a $20 million settlement. And then, Doctor, how much did the state spend prosecuting this case? Do you figure?
I really don't know, but I have to think it's just to come after me was $2 or $3 million, because I saw so many different lawyers who are attached to the Attorney General's office in all kinds of settings. So many different state troopers who I saw in various settings. And this went on for years. I know that my legal bills to my lawyers were very substantial. It's a major part of what I had earned in my life, because I had private attorneys, and I had to pay them. Let me turn that off. So, if I'm paying my lawyers all of that, but I've got a team of 2 or 3 lawyers, and they've got, when they would show up for a hearing of mine, they would have a huge entourage. I can't remember, 8, 10, 12, 20 people from the Attorney General's office coming in with boxes and notebooks, and 2 or 3 of them had guns. And there were several of these hearings along the way. It had to be, and I understand the way prosecutors work. I understand the way an attorney general's office works. They pick and choose their cases. They could go after anything. And I kept thinking throughout this, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm pretty sure they know that. They just want to win for the purposes of their own ego or reputation. They must, if they've looked at the evidence, they must know I did nothing wrong. Why aren't they fighting all this crime in the state instead of going after me? It made no sense, except that it had a media and political component, like you a couple of years said.
It was a political vendetta, period. They did everything that. Bill, can we bring up the next website, please? Bill? Producer's probably trying to cover.
You know what I thought was striking, Doc? Doctor, you just said that they had all these boxes and this entourage for something that you might have heard or you didn't hear 12 years earlier. What did they put in all those boxes? Was it all blank paper? Or
because they had interviewed hundreds of people. They kept interviewing everybody around the university, people who knew me. They were trying to find something, anything. So they would write up summaries. Eventually they had to turn them over, Brady material for my lawyers to look at. So I'd see them interviewing people who in some cases I barely knew. And everybody said, no, he's never said anything to me about that. No, we've never heard anything. No, 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 we've never seen him with Sandusky. He doesn't know Sandusky. So, they have all of this stuff, but they didn't care about it. They even sent, at state expense, prosecutors out to California to interview a colleague of mine, thinking that maybe that person, I'd said something about Sandusky years ago. And the answer was no. But, to send somebody out of state where they have to get hotel rooms, rental cars, check in with the local FBI office to say, hey, we're here from Pennsylvania, wanting to talk to somebody. And then that person's got to get a lawyer to, pay for a lawyer to be there for whatever the discussion is. I mean, this is going on all over the place during several years. It was as if they would go to no expense to find something, one thing, anything. And eventually they had one, like an email between Gary Schultz and Tim Curley, and they're waving that around at my trial. I never saw that email. I was never involved in that conversation, but there was a lot of innuendo trying to connect dots that didn't even exist.
Doctor, I wish you would have, the first 2 weeks of interviews at 3:00 in the morning, people were beyond respectful of you and shocked. I wish I could take it back with me to see what they said, because you'd be astonished. I mean, you know what the deal is, and you know what happened, but to see it at 3:00 in the morning when they're shocked and they can't believe that they just heard the allegations they've heard is
during that week when this all unfolded, I could see that the Board of Trustees was, worried about it and talking about it. And I was meeting with them every day. And during my entire career, I was a crisis manager. If you're running a university with 48,000 employees at the time, and 25,000 acres of lands, and we have our own police department, more than 100 officers, and so on. Every day, somebody did something stupid.
Yeah.
Just like any city or community. And there would be a crisis to manage. Both, how do we handle it? We handled everything. We had an occasional murder. We had all kinds of things happening. So I was a crisis manager, but the leadership of the Board of Trustees at that time said, Graham, we don't want you managing this. The board's going to manage this.
That was a mistake. What was that mistake?
That was a gag order. And they gave me a gag order to give Joe Paterno, to tell Joe, we don't want Joe, we want Joe to cancel his press conference on Tuesday and not talk about this. And so we had to send word over that Joe couldn't. And Joe and I had 30 years at Penn State. Joe had been there 60. Tim Curley, Gary Schultz, Joe Paterno, and I had more than 160 years of service to Penn State. We were loyal. We followed all the rules. And if the leaders of the board are telling us you have a gag order, well, we follow it. Now, people sometimes ask me, now in retrospect, would you have done something different? And there's a part of me that would have just called my own press conference and calmed the waters and put the facts out there and told everybody this was under control. And we're going to investigate what people are saying about Sandusky. We're going to look into this. calm down, everybody. Let's just not get crazy about this. But I didn't do that.
It would have been helpful, though.
I think
I
and in retrospect, I'm thinking, what's the worst thing they could have done if I called
that's
it?
true. That's true.
They could have fired me. Well, a day later, I had resigned.
Oh, when I walked on that campus, I think, well, what the hell is going on? What are they doing? I mean, first of all, sit back, take a deep breath, say, hey, this is what we have so far. What is accurate? My head is spinning. I'm thinking these people have gone nuts. It's just crazy.
Well, and to be on the board of trustees at Penn State it's a very prestigious position, whether you're appointed by the governor or you're elected in one way or another. And if you look back over Penn State's history, the great thing about being a trustee is, you attend meetings, but you get to go to football games, and everything is so positive because the university is positive and running well.
Yes.
But these are people, a lot of them out of corporate positions and so on, who don't have experience managing crises. And they did not know how to manage this. And they started bringing in all kinds of consultants and outsiders and different law firms. And then they kept firing them because they weren't giving them the answers they wanted. It got very messy.
Well, they should have stuck with something that worked, like yourself.
Well, thank you.
I mean, the bottom line is this: if Dr. Graham Spanier signature appears on your diploma, you did pretty damn good. Did it happen? No, it did not happen. Should somebody take the bull by the horns? Have we done that? Have we showed that there's a problem with this case, that it didn't happen? Yes. Can you report it? It's difficult for you to report it because you're going back on what you reported initially. The bottom line is, if Dr. Spanier's signature appears on your diploma, you've done pretty damn good. And
my signature is on the diploma of 300,000 Penn State graduates. And when I go to a football game and walk around the tailgates and the parking lots, I get my picture taken 1,000 times. People all come up to me and say, this was wrong what happened. We're so sorry. You were a great president. Because during my years as president, I was very active. I was visible. People knew me. They knew what I stood for. They knew my values. And this just didn't make sense to most Penn State alumni.
Doctor, you started stuff that spread to other campuses, other colleges, other universities that have worked out very well. It's amazing. They don't give you credit for that. They'll give you credit for being the sacrificial lamb of a governor obsessed with a vendetta because of politics. But they should really think about other things. Your positive impact on a bunch of 300,000 people at least, because
That's
there's a
my
lot
problem
more.
with all this.
Yeah,
It's really my problem that everything you've done, they look at the end of how this stuff. Now, everybody at Happy Valley are still happy to be around you with those 1,000 pictures that you take, but it still just rubs me the wrong way that this is. I don't even like, be honest with you, Dr. Spanier, that the reporters talk to you in confidence in the shadows, telling you that what they did was wrong. And I know even when you didn't have that initial press conference that you say you may have had or should have had, or you believe you might have went a different direction, I think at that time you thought that everything was going to be okay. I think that Joe Pye thought that everything was going to be okay because no one did anything wrong.
yeah.
I don't think you knew the evil that was lurking in the shadows that now has come out.
That's quite right. I was naive. I just thought, the truth always prevails, and if you do the right thing, it's going to turn out all right. I remember in those early days, as this was unfolding, a friend of mine who was in the media said, "Graham, you need to get an attorney." I said, "What? Why would I need an attorney?"
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I need a, I don't need an attorney. I did. He said, "Graham, you just you need one. I've seen how this has played out before." He was a journalist who covered a lot of stories and crises, and he actually contacted an attorney he knew in Philadelphia, who I'd never met, and said, "I want you to be in touch with Graham Spanier. He doesn't know that he needs an attorney, but this could get ugly, and he could probably use your help." And that's how I got an attorney.
Naive in the sense that most of us wouldn't think that a politician would go that far with a vendetta.
No,
But he did. But he did.
I know politicians, good and bad, but I could never imagine that people in the political mainstream would cross a line. And also, we have to get a state appropriation every year. I knew all of the legislators. We'd go down there, have appropriations hearings. I'd make the rounds. I thought, well, for sure, all of these legislators who know me are going to come forward and say, "This isn't right, what you're doing." Not a single one did. Even my local one. Nobody came forward.
Graham, who?
I think one of them might have called me or sent me an email saying, yeah, you're good. But no, nothing publicly. So, yeah, it's been a learning experience to see how some things in the world work. It's all different now.
Yes, sir. Well, I can tell you without telling you that I've had when he was governor, he signed up for search warrants for me in Pennsylvania, and they were unique circumstances. And after having gone through them, you wouldn't be surprised that he would do something like this.
Yeah.
He just has, when you've got an Irishman that's obsessed with his own ego, and he'll stop at nothing. He's the guy. He's the guy. And he should, hey, Governor Corbett, you should tell us, you should come on, give us a call, tell us that you did this just for vendetta against Dr. Spanier, that there's no substance.
Well,
in regards to what
talks my book about how on that, so this all kind of broke loose Monday, Tuesday. I stepped down from my position on Wednesday. The media said I was fired. That's not really true. Not that it makes a difference at this point. But I thought I was doing something very honorable, stepping aside because the trustees said they wanted to handle it. But on Thursday, Tom Corbett went before he bumped somebody off the agenda to be at the Pennsylvania Press Club to talk about this and hype things up. And he then began saying things publicly that turned a lot of people against us, Joe Paterno, and so on. He made it worse by how he handled it and how he tried to get political points out of it. I was so sure that what they were doing to Gary Schultz and Tim Curley was wrong, that even while I was still president, in my last few days as president, I went down to Harrisburg to be at their, what do you call it, arraignment or preliminary hearing.
Right.
I went down there to support them because I knew the facts, they knew the facts, and I knew this was totally wrong and would all be okay in the end. But darned if Cynthia Baldwin wasn't there representing them improperly. And I'm telling Cynthia, here's exactly the fact. And she had said with me on 2 interviews in the Attorney General's office in State College with Frank Fina interviewing me. And by the way, I talk about this in my book. That was bizarre. I went in saying to them, look, I've got the highest level of security clearances. I work with law enforcement. I've always been a champion of law enforcement. If I can help you with whatever it is you're pursuing, I'm happy to do that. And I went in and answered all their questions. And then all of a sudden it takes a turn.
Yeah.
And Frank Fina says to me, well, Dr. Spanier, do you believe in sodomy? Are you a supporter of sodomy? And I said, that is the first I've heard that's what this is about.
Yeah.
And then he starts asking me what we would call prurient questions. Like, okay, if a professor at Penn State was having sex with a student in her dorm room, you would know about that, right? I would say,
What?
Well, no, we've got 45,000 students, and what? And then he goes down this path. It was as if he, Frank Fina, had sex on the brain. And I don't care about people who have sex on the brain, but you don't bring that into a grand jury. You don't bring that into the Attorney General's office. You don't. It was more than bizarre that he was. I don't know if he thought maybe I knew that something like that was going on, but I didn't. I told him what I knew, the truth about everything.
Well, perhaps he was, mirroring himself with Porngate.
Well, of course, later on, we know that he did have that on the brain, and he was sending judges and colleagues and attorneys, people he shouldn't even be communicating with, using state attorney general's office computers to distribute. He was running a pornography ring, basically, out of the attorney general's office.
Yeah.
And Kathleen Kane came after him for it, and then they got into it. It was pretty bizarre, and I have a chapter. One chapter in my book is called Porngate. There might be some other words in the title. I have another chapter called something like The Keystone Cops, because that's how this was all unfolding.
Well, Fina must have some sort of connections, because he seems to land on his feet other than what happened to him. But both you and Kane get arrested with this guy. But he's distributing, like you said, running a pornography outfit out of the attorney general's office, and nothing happens.
Right.
He doesn't even get fired. Did he get fired for that?
Well, he had already, he knew he was going to be out when Kathleen Kane came in, because she ran on a platform of, we're going to fix this Sandusky thing. This is not right how they've been handling it. So I think she had some sense that it wasn't right. But then he was out. But then she brought in an investigator from out of state. Gansler was his name, to look at the whole Porngate thing. And he wrote a report about all this. But then the report was kind of, I'm going to say, whitewashed by Bruce Beamer once he took over. And then Beamer and others turned on Kathleen Kane. And so she was out, and Beamer was appointed. He was right away, as soon as Kane resigned, he was taken into a side room and sworn in as Attorney General. It's in the book.
Well, you know I have your book. Wow. People need to see the level of corruption that's going on that no one would ever think is going on. You figure Kathleen Kane just went to jail because she violated some sort of grand jury secrecy or whatever they alleged that she had did. Said something. I forgot off the top of my head exactly.
Turned on her and charged her for leaking something about the grand jury, which in fact, all of these other players we've been talking about were doing all along. But then they came after her, and she was out. I was not happy in many ways with Kathleen Kane, but there's a part of me that has some sympathy for how they turned on her and went after her as a part of all of this.
I can empathize with being accused of leaking grand jury information.
What about?
I'm so naive. I never knew what a grand jury was. I never had that kind of involvement with law enforcement. I had no idea how it worked. I showed up. By the way, Cynthia Baldwin said, I have told them that they are not going to subpoena you, as if it was her decision. And I said, well, that's okay. I'll go voluntarily. I just want to help. And I later found out that anyone who goes to the grand jury is technically subpoenaed. And there was a subpoena. But I didn't know what it was. And I showed up in Harrisburg. By the way, the grand jury judge was also lost his job over all of this. And that's in the book. Because he mishandled things. And I show up to grand jury and right on time. And Cynthia Baldwin said, we'll just stay in this room here for a while we work a few things out. She was gone for almost an hour and a half. When she finally, I said, what's going on? She said, oh, nothing, just some procedural stuff. But what I found out was she was cooking up a deal with FINA and the grand jury judge. And when I went before the grand jury judge, he had a laminated, probably had it for years, a piece of paper that was laminated with all the rules. And he explained to me the rules about a grand jury. And he said, one of the rules is you can never talk about what happened to the grand jury. And I said, okay. And then he said, now, except you can talk about your testimony to the grand jury. And I said, wait a minute. I'm confused about these two different things you've said. Telling me I can't talk about it, but I can talk. It was all kind of confusing. And then they said, okay, it's time to go in. And so just being respectful, you got a judge there. I stand up and I wait for him to go in. And he's still seated. And I said, oh, aren't you coming in? He said, there's no judge in the grand jury room. It's you and your lawyer, the prosecutor, and the grand jury.
Right.
That's it. Nobody else is permitted to be in there. And a stenographer. And it turns out they later violated all of those rules.
Yeah.
Cynthia Baldwin claimed she was representing me and then later gave testimony. Oh, no, I wasn't representing him. I was representing the university. But they had asked me, for the record, who is representing you? And I said, well, Cynthia Baldwin, sitting right next to me, behind me. And is that right? Ms. Baldwin, are you representing? Yeah. But there were so many things they did wrong. It was, and the last thing before we went in, Cynthia Baldwin hands Frank Fina a thumb drive. And I said to Cynthia, what is it you just handed him? And she said, well, it's your email. And I said, all of my email? She said, all of your email. And I said, well, I have 84,000 emails on my computer. Yeah, I gave it to him. I said, well, why did you give it to him? She said, because he asked for it. Actually, it had been subpoenaed, I presume, or she was just part of her deal with him. There was nothing on those emails that implicated me in any way, but she was not playing straight with me at all.
She's the first Pennsylvania State Supreme Court justice that I interviewed that had their ask for their own attorney. That's crazy.
Oh, and didn't she interrupt your interview? I've seen the transcript that you had. Didn't she interrupt your interview to call, or was that with Louis Free to say, they've asked me such and such, can I do that?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was very weird for a Pennsylvania State Supreme Court justice to conduct herself during an interview like that with me was very weird.
Yeah.
Very weird.
I look at them as being criminals, not, I hate to look at the court when I've been around judges for my whole professional life and lawyers and things of that nature. And you try to be an officer of the court, you try to be respectful. But when you see people like this who totally violate the law and attorney-client privilege or perceived attorney-client privilege, I don't even know what the heck you want to call it. They make such a mockery out of our system of laws. And you don't even know what's going on. You're sitting there, you watch your lawyer hand the person who's trying to put you in jail a thumb drive. She didn't even discuss it with you.
No. I know we're about at the end of the time. Here's another anecdote. So we are in Judge Hoover's courtroom in Dauphin County. He had sat on all of this for a year because he was up for re-election. Turns out he had a brain tumor and died later, but the brain tumor may have explained some of his behavior in the courtroom. I would speculate now, but so we go in there and it's a secret hearing. I describe it in the book. It's going to be very secret, and only the night before would we be told where to go. We had to go to the fifth floor of a parking garage and go through some back door and come in, and and I had to go to the bathroom, and they said, well, there are no bathrooms here, but there's a juvenile cell down the hall. So we'll take you down to the juvenile cell, and none of us will look. We'll just turn our backs. There was, a little metal thing attached to the wall. Anyway, we finally get into the courtroom, and Cynthia Baldwin is there with a big, heavy black notebook, not a normal size 3-ring binder, double size, like 6 inches tall. And she's up at her podium standing with this notebook. And my lawyer says to her, can I just ask you, what are you looking at there? And she said, oh, just things to refresh my memory. We didn't push that. My lawyer didn't push it. But I'm a sociologist. I was curious about everything. I always thought this would go away. So anytime we were in a courtroom, I wanted to be the last one to leave. Why? Because I wanted to see what happens as the prosecutors and judges and people are leaving. And what I saw at that hearing was Cynthia taking this big black notebook, giving it to Bruce Beamer, who was the lead prosecutor at the time, and saying, here's the notebook back. And then they give each other a big hug. They give each other a big hug and congratulate each other on how well Cynthia did in her testimony. And I think it was that hearing or another one where the judge and the prosecutor afterwards are talking about their golf game coming up, and then everybody leaves. I thought, this is not the way I understand.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Doctor, one, you're not naive. Nobody expects a politician to go that far to fulfill their vendetta. Two, if Dr. Graham Spanier's signature is on your diploma. You're in good hands. Should he be president of Penn State still, and Penn State kicking, excuse me for my French, kicking ass as it was under you? Yes, it should be. All of that should be happening. Did this happen? No, it did not. It never did. Farthest stretch of imagination. And believe me, if you think this happened, you're stretching your imagination. So, Doctor, we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. And we certainly hope that you, I think I mentioned before, Dr. Spanier is a world-class racquetball player, and he's recovering from knee surgery. And we hope him the best. Just to watch him on the court is amazing.
Well, John, you are you adhere to detail and the truth so clearly, but in the case of my racquetball credentials, you do exaggerate.
Hey, I've seen it happen though. It's awesome. It's awesome.
All right, thanks everybody.
Well, real quick, just make sure you guys go out and get in the lines in if you already don't have it, and follow the Parlato report, because we really need to keep this out there, and maybe someone will tell the truth. Surprise us.
Yeah, Doctor, we'd love to have you back when you have time, when you recover. Okay?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Spanier, for your time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.